Said parcel of land was purchased in 1803 by the Thomas Jefferson administration from France, the land commonly known as the Louisiana Purchase. The French had acquired it by military victory from Spain. Spain had acquired it from the Indians by conquest. And the Indians came to own it from God, the Creator. I hope this complies with your request. That lawyer took it all the way back to the beginning. Read the Bible and you'll see it. All that we have came from God. All that we have is God's right now. And all that we have, Hebrews tells us, what's it going to do? It's going to return to God. And this is true for everything. It's true for my car. It's true for my house. It's my clothing, my bank account, my family, my very flesh and blood. Everything belongs to God. Paul reminds us in 1 Timothy, we were brought into this world with nothing, and we cannot take anything out. That brings the old saying that brings a smile to a face every time. You never see a boat hitch on a hearse. You never do. Anyway, if all ownership is God's, number one, then faithful management is whose? Ours. It's mine. It's yours. Look at the cover of the bulletin. The text tells us that the rich man divided his property among his servants, and he sent them out to work with the resources that he had entrusted to them until he came back. That's what theologians, that's what preachers call stewardship. Let me tell you what stewardship means. Stewardship means that you and I, all of us, are out of the ownership business. We don't own it. God made it. God owns it. God gave it to us. We are not in the ownership business. Rather, you and I are into management. That's where we are. It means that our life is like a huge ship loaded with valuable cargo to be delivered to people all over the world. God is the owner of that ship. That's his cargo. You and I, we're just the captains of the ship. We take it where it needs to be gone, needs to go. In Romans 1, Paul is very, very clear about his obligation to God. He uses 3 I am statements. He says, number 1, I am under obligation. He says, number 2, I am eager to preach. And he says, number 3, I am not ashamed. It's almost as if God had given Paul this great wealth, this huge amount of things, and it was Paul's obligation, it was Paul's responsibility to pass it on. Guess what, friends? It's not just Paul's obligation. It's not just Paul's responsibility. It's not just Paul who got the massive amount of great wealth. I don't care how much money you got in your billfold. We are a wealthy people. We are a blessed people. And we have that responsibility to pass it on. A number of years ago, there was a story in the New York Times about a college graduate who moved to New York City to make his billions in banking. When he went, he drove a very, very nice car that was a gift from his brother, who was older. One day, as he was getting into his very nice car, a poor inner city kid came and was looking at it. And the young man looked at the kid eyeing his car, and he just said, "My brother gave it to me." And that was his explanation. And the kid said, "I wish," and immediately the banker thought he was going to say, "I wish I had a car like that." But that's not what the child said. The child said, "I wish I could be a brother like that." The banker asked, "Would you like a ride?" "Wow! Sure, I want to ride. What a crazy question. So the boy jumped in, and boy, they drove around. Pretty soon the young man asked the banker, could we stop over here in front of that old building while I run upstairs? The banker thought he was probably going to go get a friend of his to come down and gawk at his car. And he was pretty amazed when the kid came down helping a severely crippled young man down the steps. And he introduced him to the banker, and he said, this is my brother. And it was very obvious that he had a very severe handicap. Just look at this car, he said, isn't it fine? And then listen to what he said. Someday, I'm going to buy you a car like this. Someday, I'm going to buy you a car like this. Now, friends, that is biblical stewardship. It's not about how much of my money can I give to God. Biblical stewardship is about how much of God's money am I going to keep. It's not about me. Biblical stewardship is not about mine. Biblical stewardship is not I-focused. Biblical stewardship is God-focused. Biblical stewardship is others-focused. Biblical stewardship is the compassionate use of all that we have. When we get to heaven, God is not going to ask us what kind of car we drove. What He's going to do is say, how did you use it to help others? God's not going to ask us, how many square feet did your house have in it? He's going to ask us, how many people did you use to provide shelter and help in it? He's not going to ask us about our net worth or our Raymond James portfolio or any of that. What He's going to ask us about is, how generous were you in helping other people? I want you to think real quick. Pop quiz. Pop quiz. 2 minutes. Somebody name me the last 3 Miss Americas. Name the last 10 Super Bowl champions. Give me the name of 10 United States senators. Give me the 5 best actor Oscar winners. I don't see any hands popping up. Nobody can do it. You know, it's not terribly important. But how many of you all remember the name of folks that came to see you when you were in the hospital? That brought you a bowl of soup, George, when you had knee replacement? How many of you all know the names of friends that you can lean on and that give you support and are Christ in the flesh in this life that you need? How many of you can name that Sunday school teacher or that school teacher that helped you get to be where you are? You see, God has invested greatly in all of us. Time, talent, money. Every bit of it is His. To each of us, He has entrusted a sum. And here's the truth. Here's the truth. That sum that we have, He has strategically placed each one of us, you and me, where we can best express His love and kindness in Christ-centered ministry. So, one last thing. If everything belongs to God, and if we are in the management business, then there's one final truth yet that we have to look at, and that is accountability is coming. Accountability. The text tells us that that businessman came back and he called in each of his employees to see what they'd done with the venture capital. And the reward for the work well done was more work. But the punishment for lack of vision and laziness and selfishness was that even what he had, the one who lacked those things, his was taken away. In every game, there's a buzzer. There's a whistle. There's a finish line. There's a bell. that signals the end of the contest. Then there's a winner and there's a loser. Well, for us, each of us, one of these days, there's going to be an end. There will come a day in our lives when that trumpet from on high will sound, and we, as management, will cease all commerce. Won't be there anymore. And we're going to have to stand before God. And we're going to have to give an account of our stewardship. The text says some of us are given 5 talents. Some of us are given 2. Some of us 1. We're not all equally endowed. But a man or a woman shows who he is by what he does with what he has. In the parable, the 5-talent man told the businessman, "Master, you delivered to me 5 talents, here I've made 5 more." And he was commended. The same with the 2-talent employee, and so on. "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Oh, but then there was that one employee who took his talent to the master and sourly complained. "I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you did not winnow. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground." You know how that translates? Let me give you an everyday translation of that. "I resent your lordship over me. I am into possession. I want my things. I'm not into management. I'll work to put money in my pocket, but I won't do it for you." In short, he rejected the boss. He rejected the entire concept of stewardship. And you remember what Jesus called him? Jesus wasn't happy. This isn't the Jesus of love and compassion and grace and forgiveness. This is the Jesus that is fair, is true, and Jesus called him wicked. Jesus called him slothful and cast him into outer darkness. Folks, I'm not making it up. You heard it. This is serious. Ownership of everything belongs to God. Faithful use of resources for ministry belongs to us. And judgment will be there. There's not a consensus, but the figure you see the most of is there are 48 parables that Jesus told. 5 of them deal with God's character. 8 of them deal with history. 4 of the parables encourage us to watch faithfully for Christ's coming. 3 tell us to pray and don't lose heart. 8 deal with obedience. 9 of the parables, the most, deal with stewardship. Now, why do you suppose Jesus talked so much about possessions, so much about managing our stuff? Well, I think, and reading other folks, the consensus is that he did so because he felt like money was his chief rival for the soul of his creation. After all, think about it. What was it that caused the rich young ruler to walk away from Christ? What was it? Money. What was it? What was it that caused the prodigal son, that the prodigal son wanted from his father, and when he got it, he ran away